Welcome again to another episode of Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life. I am your host, Lionel McDonald. So, special guest this week, my good friend Andy Stearns from the US. He's living in Florida, used to live in DC. We both like the Commanders. We also could consider that maybe they should get Lamar Jackson, maybe they should not. I think I've had multiple dreams with Lamar wearing a black jersey with burgundy and gold, but I think the jury is out right now whether that actually happens. So, Andy, what do you think? What do you think about Lamar potentially, join the Commanders? I think the word is if he were the quarterback for the Commanders, they could be a Super Bowl contending team. They're the best team in the NFC East. I 100% believe that if Lamar Jackson's the quarterback, and we already saw the East take three teams to the playoffs, and if it wasn't for our own selves getting in the way, we probably would have had four teams. But what do you think about Lamar Jackson being the quarterback of the Commanders?
Yeah, I kind of like you. It's a dream, right? There's so many things that could happen that have to
Yeah,
fall into place. And, we signed Payne today. So, that's a big chunk of salary right there. And
yeah,
yeah, I don't know how the numbers would work out,
yeah,
but yeah, if he somehow ended up in there, then yeah, we're at least right there with the Eagles. Because obviously are going to lose some pieces and yeah.
yeah. Because they're already talking about Darius Slay being
Yep. Trade.
released or let go or something that effect. And hey, we were talking about Darius Slay being a Pro Bowl player to start the year, and probably halfway point he was a Pro Bowl player, and then probably didn't play as well in the second half, and that's where they're slated to draft a corner. The best corner available is who they're going to take in the draft. So it's going to
Yeah.
be interesting how it plays out because Lamar wants his money, and no one really wants to give him his money because again, there's a ton of teams that need a QB, and they don't want to pay him. And then obviously the Ravens don't want to give him. That's why they gave him that 1 year, franchise tag, and at the same time, they've given him an opportunity to go find a suitor that will take him to give him his. And I think it's his 6 years. And I think the challenge is Lamar is, negotiating his own contract so he can get full bank versus having to pay an agent 5 or 10%. So I think that's messing up the negotiations of this actually happening. And I think Lamar being personally invested in him, like his terms are not what teams want to sign up for. Because again, he was real banged up last year. And I think that's where some people are a little bit scared that
Yeah.
they're going to take a franchise QB and he's
I
not
think
going to
that's
be out.
yeah, as the guaranteed money continues to go up and up for all positions, really.
Yep.
Especially for quarterback. I think those running quarterbacks it's I think teams will be a little less likely to throw 100 million guaranteed or
Mm-hmm.
the Watson contract that was out there. So it'll be interesting. And then there's a lot of skeptics that say he's not accurate and he's not the great passer, pocket passer, which I don't know if he's really proven skeptics wrong there. I mean, obviously he's done enough to
Yep.
win, and have an MVP season. And so, yeah, I mean, he would add value to 95% of the teams
Yep.
out at the quarterback position. So if he somehow landed in Washington, I would be the first one to buy his jersey. So
100%. We'd be Team Lamar, and I think our whole chat group would have a Lamar Jackson jersey. I think it would have to be like this would be the guy that can take us to the promised land.
yep.
And I think both of us wish that we would win a title in our lifetime. And obviously, I think we're old enough that we've seen two, if not three. I definitely would like to see one. Since obviously our last couple playoffs appearances have been a little lackluster with no wins, and we haven't really won a game in 20 plus years. So to see a deep run and see them, actually do well and actually, perform and can be a 12-5 or, an 11 and whatever it is, 16, that would be awesome to see. But they
Well,
got
and
to figure it out. They got to
yeah,
figure it because again, like I don't think the current QB situation, obviously, no Wentz, no Heineke. I don't think he can leave it to the kid to take us to the promised land. So they're not going to draft one. That's what they're talking about. They're not drafting one. You
Yep.
know, is it going to be Garoppolo that's going to be dramatically better than what we've had? I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, Howell's the guy, and it's just a matter of, who knows what happens there. But
Yeah,
I'm just happy there's some stability now. We're re-signing players instead of players requesting trades, and
yeah, exactly.
Allen signing and Payne signing, and you know Scary Terry signing. So yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
to see those type of deals happen, those haven't happened. That hasn't happened for us as fans. We've just seen people perform and move on. You know
Totally.
and so, yep. So it should be exciting. Should be exciting off season. That's kicks off here in, you
Yeah.
know,
And
what it.
signing and then actually performing better than when they played for us, or them signing here and you know what? They actually were at the end of their career and everyone else saw it except for us. And we threw a boatload of money and blew our cap. And
Yeah.
we saw it with Bruce Smith. We saw it with my favorite player, Deion Sanders. He was at the end of his career. He should not have had such a big deal, but we paid him. I'm okay with it. It's my guy. We paid him, but that wasn't for the betterment of
Which that may be a good segue because
yeah.
there was definitely no diamond turf on the list at all.
And
So
that was shocking. So
that was shocking.
so for those listening, appreciate everyone listening again. And this probably is going to air late March, early April, as we're doing a women's focus for the month of March for Women's History Month. But I think, where we're going to focus our energies today is there was a very interesting article that came out from Complex on, as Andy was alluding to, the top 50 Nike shoes. And again, before we go too far into it, Sneaks Rhymes and Life can be found on wherever you stream, whether it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, Google, and then obviously you can find the video of this on YouTube. But Complex, and I think we found it on Complex Canada. At least I think that's where I first saw it. Is Nike's top 50 shoes? And it's like, oh, that's a daunting list. How are they going to come up with the 50? Like, where are they going to start? Where are they going to finish? And then I think the first thing, and Andy or kind of I talking about on the side before we started recording is, are they actually going to include Jordan? And I think, if you think of a true Nike list, you can't include Jordan. This list has Jordan. So Andy and I are going to break down the list, kind of go through it, kind of have some conversation. But before we go too far, Andy, maybe you can kind of give us a little snippet about, your sneaker world. How did you get started with sneakers? Like what was the early gateway sneaker for you?
Yeah, I grew up in the DC area, Southeast DC, PG County. So big sneaker culture in the early 80s, right around when Georgetown and Ewing were, they were in their dream seasons. And so the
This is a
Terminator.
Syracuse hat, by the way.
Oh,
So
yeah, hey, so
careful
hey,
what you say.
Big East, so that iconic Terminator High Georgetown colorway, I was there right when the 990s came out. People those were getting pretty big. Reebok Classics, all the things that went into a normal sneaker culture for me. So, growing up in the DC area, shoes were everything. That's what it was. You went to school and whatever shoes you had, that was a big deal. And and you kind of, whether you fit in, or part of conversations. Unfortunately, probably a little bit too much bullying going on, if you didn't have the right kicks. So that was my introduction to. I moved to the DC area in like first grade, and was immediately into this like sneaker, like, and I had no clue, right? I'm in first grade and, just naive to everything, and people asking me about shoes and I have no idea. Right. So, that was my first love for it. And I remember some of those shoes, like the Terminator High, obviously Air Force Ones and 990s, were very prevalent. And, so just would go to the Foot Lockers, the Athlete's Foots, all the regular stores and just stare at shoes and just wish I could get them. And of course, my parents would never pay more than $30 for a pair of shoes. So
Oh yeah, those days.
yeah, so that's where the love came. It was more of a love and dream, and just for me, just something that, instantly, I guess, made me happy, because
Hmm.
I remember my first pair. I had a lot of like kangaroos, and I had some Diodoras and British Knights, so I had some stuff that were okay, as far
Yeah.
as the British Knights and things. But I remember my first pair of Nikes, and yeah, I think they were the Nike Metros. There were so
Okay.
many shoes that all look the same, like the internationalists and that stuff. So, yeah, and I just remember how excited I was. Number one, that my mom actually paid for a pair of Nikes. Like
Yeah.
it never. We would go every time. She'd be like, "No, you'd have to get this one or this one." And then that just kind of from there, I saw like what a shoe could do for somebody because that was like the first like cool shoe
Yeah.
that I thought that I had.
Yeah.
And yep, and so from there, just it took off and never went away, right? So
Yeah.
just kind of like your podcast, right? It was kind of music, sneakers, sports, all of that, and just
Hmm.
been involved in that culture, ever since my whole life, basically. Yep.
Yeah. So you touched on so many things, like the shoe that your parents would buy, and it was $30. And I remember my dad thought he was doing me a huge favor. He went to the US to visit my grandma, comes back and say, "Hey, I got a new pair of shoes for you." I was like, "Oh my God, what did he get me? Did he get me Nikes?" Like he knows that I need a pair of Zips. And this is right around where Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff came with the song, and they mentioned it's like, I wanted Nikes and I got Zips. And it's like, there's no chance. I'm never putting my foot in that. I don't care if that's the only shoe you ever bought. And that was kind of like the idea. I have to find a way to get my own shoes. Like, because if this is the choices that are being made for me, I have to find a way. So the first pair was like a pair of Puma suedes. And that was like, okay, I see people on TV, they're breakdancers in New York. This is an acceptable shoe. Fast forward, I think that was grade 7, grade 8. Some kid, this is like 1989. He goes to the US and comes back after spring break. And what does he have? A pair of fire red, or maybe it was white cement, but Jordan 4s. And people are going, "What the hell is that?" He's the first kid in school, Steve Morgan, first kid in school to have a pair of Jordans. And we're in grade 8. And it's like, okay, the level has gone up like 4 levels. I just wanted a pair of Nikes. And I think the first one I ended up buying was like a bunch of kids got the Bo Jacksons later that year. And I ended up with Nike TW trainers. So it's like, this is I can afford. I think I had to pay, like, I cut grass and shovel snow for 6 months, and I paid half, my mom paid half, and that was the shoe. And ever since then, it's like I have to find a way. I think I got Reebok pumps, and I wore that in like grade 11 basketball, and that was like the greatest thing ever because that was right after D Brown had
Yep.
done D Brown things, and then I was like, I don't care if I have one shoe a year, but I'm gonna get the cool shoe. That's the way it's gonna happen. And I still remember a kid when I was, going into university. He lived on my street and says, like, you know what? You're never going to own a pair of Jordans. And I don't know if I carry that with me subconsciously, but oh boy, was he wrong.
Yeah.
Wow, was
Oh,
he ever wrong? Like, that is
oh,
the
yeah.
worst blasphemous statement that could ever be made. Because yeah, I
Oh,
have
I think,
hundreds, and not to brag, but I J Jordan's my favorite brand. That's what
yeah.
it is.
No, I think there's those moments. And I think when you talk about sneaker culture and, especially who's been around the game for so long, you just have those moments. We all remember them.
Mm-hmm.
They all bring back memories.
Yep.
I remember my friend, it was the last day of school and fifth grade. And I remember he had the cement threes, the white cement threes. And I just remember I was like, how'd you get those? Like how'd your parents
Yeah.
like those for you? And then the following year, that same year, that's when like the Air Max ones came out and
Mm-hmm.
people had those, some of the people, drug dealers and stuff like that all had all the Air Max line that came out. And yeah, I just remember it's just like I remember like it was yesterday. And so, fell in love with all the Bo Jackson's cross training lines
Yep.
because my mom would justify that somehow because they weren't Jordans. Like in her mind, Jordans were $100 and more, and you're never gonna.
Exactly.
But then I could, some of those Nike basketball, they were in that $50-$60 range, the Bo Jacksons, and so those TWs, Air Max TW,
Yep.
so yeah, it's just interesting that all these years later, you still remember it.
Oh yeah. Like it's yesterday. I think again, going into my last year of high school, and my brother um was obsessed with Charles Barkley. I thought it was so funny. It's like, because he like my brother is lighter than myself, lighter than my youngest brother, but he was obsessed with first the Sixers, and like when we followed basketball, it was the Sixers because Barkley was on it, because he was shorter and he was tough and he just didn't care about what anyone thought about it. And then he went to the Phoenix Suns. So my brother decides that his on his Christmas list, the number one and the only thing he put on his list, the Air Max 180 basketball shoe, the black and like
Yeah,
purplish
Air
blue.
Force
And I was,
Ones.
and I'm going, I'm like laughing. And it's like, there's no chance that mom and dad are spending like $170 Canadian on this shoe.
Yeah.
There's no chance. Like, you're just going to get everything that you didn't ask for. Like, you had other things you could have asked for video games. You could have done so many different things. You're not getting this. Why does Christmas morning roll around? I go downstairs and I see a box and it's a pair. It looks like a pair of shoes, and it's like, there's no way. There's no way he got it. He opens that as his first gift, and I was like, why did I not ask for a pair of
Why
shoes?
didn't
I
you
asked
ask
for a whole
for
bunch of
it?
random stuff, and this guy has 180s. He has the best shoe in the house.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
these again, like you're saying, like
Which is
these
a
are
great
things that
shoe.
you'll never forget.
Which by the way wasn't on the list either. The
It's
Air Max,
totally like total.
which
Like I
in
have to
the
like throw some shoes off because it's
because I
totally
yeah.
should have been on the list. So
And that
let's
was
talk about
the
this
Fab
list.
Five. They wore those, right? Weber wore those. Like that was
At one point, he did. Even like the Hirachis that they wore, that is
yep.
not on the list. And that's one of the arguably the most iconic shoes. That's supposed to come back later this year. And I know people are like through the roof excited because it's the OG colorway. But I did have those in, I don't know, like grade 12. But I had the all black version with the Michigan blues. So
Yeah.
let's really dive into the list. So, what are your initial thoughts when you see this list? And then maybe you can let's start with what is a shoe that stands out that is just way too low on this top 50? So again, qualifying it, this list definitely has Jordan on it, which I think in many respects should not, but it does. So now, again, we've already mentioned Diamond Turf didn't make the list. Hirachi didn't make the list. Air 180 basketball running didn't even make the list. So like this is already like to me, it's a shoddy list. But tell
Yeah.
me the shoe that you see on the list that is just way too low for how important the shoe is.
I would say I think the Hirachi 2K4 for like right away. I mean, that was a basketball shoe that, just kind of took off and it kind of ushered in that new Zoom. Um, I remember trying it on for the first time and it was like a lighter shoe, because you either had like these, heavy max shoes. There wasn't a lot of lightweight basketball in the Nike sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until those came out. And then, obviously, it was, Rip Hamilton was wearing, it was just kind of, it just took off, right? Obviously, Kobe wore them down the line.
Yep.
So I thought that one, like, if you're going to pick a basketball shoe in that Hirachi lane, number one, I thought it should have been the first Hirachi basketball shoe, right? Like
Yep.
from the Fab Five. But I thought that one stuck out to me as that one could be a little bit lower. I would like to see, I thought the waffle racer that they put in, I don't know if that's too high. I don't know what shoe you put in there, whether it's the Cortez or, the waffle trainer or, some of those early on shoes. Like there's not a lot of like early 70s, early 80s that are anywhere on the list. So,
Mm-hmm.
so to think that something that, I mean, you can't have Nike without some of those like first shoes that came out, and that really, now to the defenses, I was looking at some like a lot of those 80 shoes were just like the air structure. They all look the same, like the
Yeah.
international, the Metro. It
Yeah.
was kind of like determine any of them, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the Pegasus I think is way too low. I think that
I would agree.
I think at 38, I mean, if you think the Pegasus, I think they're on the 39 now, and they're still making them. It's still a great performance running shoe. I mean, it's a lot of people's go-to daily trainer. I know it hasn't ever really tapped into the sneaker culture, sneakerhead world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of sneakerheads wearing Pegasus, but to think a shoe that, a running shoe that had air in it 1983, and then 39 years later, it's still one of the best. I mean, if you ask runners, hey, what's your go-to daily trainer shoe? They'll Air Pegasus,
Yeah.
Pegasus, right? So yeah, I think that one kind of got the shaft a little bit there. Um, Looking at it, when you get down to like some of the ones that are, and again, that's where it's hard with that Jordan. I think there's 10 Jordan shoes, so you're talking about 20% of the list. You have to dedicate the Jordan shoes. I think
Yeah.
that from it, but I think the Air Max Plus, to me, that's like a top 15
Yeah.
shoe. When you
You
think of
remember where it fell? I thought it was somewhere, at least
I
I think
had
it
it
was in the
down.
top
It was
25.
23. It was 23. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did make the top, but to me, when you throw out like a Tech Challenge 2, an Air Presto, like I mean, heck, the Air Presto wasn't even made for like 15 years, and they bring
Yeah.
it back, they take it out. That was my other problem with the list, is that there were shoes on there that really don't have a lot of legs to them, and it's like some of the shoes that have had, like an Air Force One and things like that, to me, those are shoes that make a list. I
Yeah.
know the Yeezys are on there a couple of times. I mean,
Because
those
they,
were,
they need some sauce, right? Like
yeah,
obviously
like I
this is
mean,
complex and there's
yep,
they need a splash of something. So Yeezy
yeah,
one, where did I see that? I think it was like 17, and then
yeah,
I think you go a little higher up the list. And Yeezy 2, I definitely would say is better than Yeezy 1. Yeah, I think Yeezy 2 ends up being in the top 10 somehow. Yeah, it's 9. It's somehow better than the Jordan 5, which I think is ludicrous, but
yeah.
um
And I get it. You got to add, like you said, you got to add some stuff in there and some
yeah,
relevant sneaker culture stuff. But even I think of, yeah, I just think there's some opportunities. I thought the Kobe 4 was way too high. I get it. I understand Kobe and,
yeah,
um, but I don't think that when you talk about a lot of the shoes that, it's, to me, that's pretty high up there. Because to me, the Kobe 6 should be
that
higher than
you
Kobe 4.
literally stole the words in my mouth. Like Kobe
Yeah.
6 should be higher than Kobe 4. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Kobe 4 shouldn't be on the list, but maybe they should be in reverse. I think Kobe 6 is in the 40s and Kobe 4 is like high 30s, low 20s. So
Yeah.
it is of definitely a fickle list. I think the one that really jumped off the page, you mentioned the Hirachi, which is one. I think when you kind of like you scroll to, and I got to the first three shoes, and two of them I just like I was up in arms. Like when you think of Nike basketball,
Yeah.
and obviously it's having a renaissance based on what LeBron has done, but for the Zoom generation, and they show the color, the first game color, which they're going to retro again this year, for it to be 49 on a Nike list, and that was the gateway to LeBron's entire catalog of shoes that were now at 20. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I wouldn't say that's better than the 8, which everyone goes, hey, South
No.
Beach looks so good, and I get that, but for this shoe to be at
Yeah, to
49, I
be
think
that
is,
high.
wow, come on
Well,
now.
and it was the best. I mean, there was no LeBron until like the sevens or eights that
Yeah.
even like, I mean, they were ugly. I mean,
Hmm.
they were pretty. I mean, you got your LeBron fans that are gonna love every LeBron,
Yeah.
kind of like I guess it's like that Jordan 2. You have the Jordan 2 loyal
Yeah,
to.
that's me. I'm through and
Yeah,
through the Jordan 2, and yeah,
yeah. I love
there's
the
a
Jordan
small
2 too, but
there's a small pocket. It doesn't
aesthetically,
compare to
yeah,
1 or
doesn't
3.
right, exactly. So I think that's how you get with that shoe. Like you had that range of 2, 3, 4, 5s, were pretty, I don't know. But then you come through and to me, like again, what you dedicate to the list, um, I get the Jordan, the LeBron 8 for sure. I mean, that
Hmm.
has to be on there. I mean, the South Beach colorway changed. With him going to Miami,
Yeah,
that just kind of changed everything. I mean, that really shot off the whole SIG athlete craze for a good, 8 years.
100%.
That literally took it off, and took it to the next level. So that shoe definitely holds a spot, but I agree that that's way too high for that Zoom generation. I mean, how many times have they given a lifetime contract to anybody, right?
No,
So
and they did it from jump with LeBron, so it's wild. So let's pivot here. What is a shoe that's on the list that is just too high? Like you think of all the iconic shoes out there. What is the list? What is the shoe that is just
Yeah,
way
I'm
too
looking
high?
at the list. There's a couple, right? Like I think the Zoom Fly on there is ranked like 42nd.
Hmm.
If you're gonna put a marathon or running shoe, then put the next percent on there. At least put the one that actually like broke the marathon, record.
Yeah,
So that one, either you either take it off, whatever. And then the Flyknit trainer, I don't even know how that's on there. Like that's number 37. So I mean, think about that, right? Like the Flyknit trainer is ranked ahead of the KD4, LeBron sevens, Air Max Penny one. I mean, that's like
that's another one
like
that is
yeah,
just
Groovy
way
Max
too low, and
one.
like that,
Yeah,
it hurt my feelings that it
um,
was so low.
yes, and so to even have that on a top 50 list, I don't know who they're trying to please there. I mean, yeah, I get when that shoe came out, it was flying it and it introduced like and it was like there was some hype around it, but
Hmm.
it died pretty quickly. I mean, you don't see people, up in arms talking about the Flyknit, racer or trainers.
But I think that that one makes the list because of the technology. It was the gateway to,
Yeah,
so many shoes that are now flying it. And I think it's like kind of sticking a flag in the ground and saying, well, this shoe's important because it's flying it. And this was the first one. So this is a gateway to so many other basketball shoes and other performance shoes because of the technology, and the technology is continuing to be used. I think that's why that shoe is on the list. And again, it's too high, but in my
yeah,
opinion.
I can certainly see that. And I would argue with because I had talked about the 2K4 Hirachi probably too high, not low enough, but the Hyperdunk 2008 again that had the first fly wire I think for a
Yep.
basketball shoe. So I don't know where that lies. The subjectivity, it makes it fun, right? It makes it
Yeah.
able to argue back and forth, but to not have if we're talking about revolutionary technology, right, and then sneaker culture, like there's not one shock shoe on there, right, and I
Yeah. Like
and so,
that's another one. Like, how
yeah,
did the BB4
yeah,
not end up? And maybe it's not the BB4, maybe it's the R4.
yeah, maybe it's the R4. I could do the
How is that
R4,
not
right,
on the
the
list?
R4, because that was a long run, and again, like it was a technology piece that
Yeah.
Nike's done a great job of bringing technology pieces that end up turning fashion,
Yeah.
and then end up not being that great of technology in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. So
Yeah.
it's almost like they have these flop with technologies, but then they somehow are
Yeah.
able to market it and it becomes just this phenomenon, right? So
Totally. They use Vince to,
yeah,
celebrate the Boeing, and kids were saying it in store. It's like, Dad, I need the Boeing shoes. I need the Boeing shoes.
yeah.
Mom, I need the Boeing shoes.
I
And
mean,
it's
it
like,
it took off. I mean, I don't, yeah, it definitely took off. So I think once you get into like, top 25, I didn't see a lot of, I mean, you could argue where they belong in the place of it. But I didn't have a problem with too many of them other than the
mhm,
Yeezys. Because those were like so limited, you know what I
yeah,
mean? It's not like how you have the Air Mag in there. Like nobody had that shoe, so it's
yeah.
like,
It's like a trophy shoe. Like
yeah,
no
it's a
one owns
trophy.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so how can that be the best when no one even was
yeah,
able to purchase it? So
totally.
I do think
Fat
that,
Joe and
yeah,
and obviously the Sneaker King. They have those, but there's not many people that have that shoe. So it's like, how does that rank? I think, yeah, you know what? It was in a movie. It was like an iconic moment, Back to the Future. And yeah, that's why, people love that shoe. But is it a really, does it belong? Like, I think it's like 25 or something like that. Does it
yeah,
really belong that high on the list? So the shoe that I would say, and I think it's only on the list, and it's high as it because of recency bias. If we did not, it did the shoe did not create so much energy during the pandemic because of when it launched. There's no way in my eyes that the Nike Dunk,
I was
as
gonna say,
much as I love it, is
yep,
not a top five shoe.
no,
If and particularly you're including Jordan, it's not a top 10 shoe,
no,
because
it's
back in, I would tell you, like 2003, we were literally giving them away. That
yeah,
and Cortez, because people had stopped. And like, there's been multiple times in the market since. the dunk came out in the mid 80s, and for those that know, I've done an episode on the dunk. It was the college shoe. It was the shoe that you colored up, whichever. So you played for Marquette, you played for Iowa, you played for Georgetown, you played for Syracuse, you played for Michigan, you played for Indiana, like Ohio State. They had a colorway that your whole team could wear. It was simple. It looked cool. It was kind of like some of the other shoes that they eventually, led to with Jordan and Air Force, obviously, which was a predecessor to that. But the way they decided to color this shoe up and have a lighter midsole, it obviously had a moment in time, but so did a lot of shoes that we've already mentioned today. But recency bias, and because things were closed and then things were very limited demand, they did some great collaborations since 2020, and now the shoe has a life of its own. It's like it can't go away. It's like the Panda Dunk. The Panda Dunk is like the new Air Force One. It's like the limited drop. They just drop every week. It sells out the same day, and we move on to next week's inventory.
I I thought that if anything, the SB dunk, like somewhere along there,
Yeah,
that has more legs than the regular dunks. Because to your
totally
point,
agree.
this is like a three. Nobody wore dunks until 2020, until
Yeah,
like then out of nowhere, the Panda Dunk
yeah,
on its own. But a lot of that was because you couldn't get all whites. You couldn't find any
yeah.
Air Forces. And yeah, I just think I'm glad you brought that up because when you that was one that I saw that, like, again, great shoe, right?
Yeah.
Like phenomenal shoe. In the 80s, it certainly had its place, but then it was
Mhm.
gone for 30 years.
Totally.
It was just gone.
Yeah.
And no one asked for it. It wasn't someone's
No,
like,
no,
yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't even,
but they're
it
not
kind of went,
comfortable. They're not
yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah,
Um,
I find them comfortable. Actually, I would take a
okay.
dunk over an Air Force. Like that's me.
See,
Like
I
I
would take an Air Force. I think an Air Force has a little more to it, but yeah.
I think it's, half a dozen of this, six of that, they're very comparable. But I think there was like a wave from like 2003 or four to like 2008 where they started doing collabs. Like this is where the De La Soul dunk came from. This is where there's an MF Doom dunk that came out. And
Pigeon
and
dunks. I mean,
they started to mean something, but there's also some of them that this is where kind of SBs kind of had a life and it continued life, but not in the mainstream. But after like 2008, the dunk was dead until 2000 and 2020. But hey, you know how Nike rolls? Nike tells a story and says, hey, this is like the 25th anniversary of the Nike dunk, and now it's important, or 35th anniversary, and everyone should jump on board. And they started making some colors limited, and people wanted it, and because influencer reward, and then the law of supply and demand. They didn't supply a lot. Like they made, like how they made a white and black shoe like the most needed shoe in.
and what I will say, the Panda Dunk that's a phenomenon, right? Because you
Totally
see
is.
60-year-olds wearing it, you see young kids wearing it, you see mom and dads wearing it. Like it's just a shoe that you have it,
Yeah.
and I don't know how many. I've had a few pairs of them, and yeah, it's one of those. It's become a rotational shoe, right?
Yeah.
Like it or not. Now that's happened in the past 3 years, 2 to 3 years. So to
Mm-hmm.
put number five, to put even above like a blazer, that
There's
was
no way.
you just can't.
Yeah. But they have. And like
Yeah,
the Blazer has its own renaissance because it's a flat shoe. It's been colored up well. There's been a lot of supermodels that have worn it. And obviously it's now become, it's one of those the iconic shoes that are now in the gym rotation for many people. You see so many girls at my gym now, they like do leg day in a pair of Blazers, and
yeah.
it's only
Blazers,
one color. It's black and white. Like my
yeah,
wife has a beautiful like plaid pair. She wants to get rid of them. It's like, are you crazy? There's no way you need to get rid of that shoe. And I bought her that shoe at like Urban Outfitters, and it's like you need to hold on to that shoe because that shoe is cool right now. And
yeah.
you would break necks wearing that shoe
I
if you
mean,
wore it outside.
to think that like 30 to 50% of the gym goers are wearing a blazer.
Yeah, or Converse
Yeah,
shoes.
like to squat and I get it, flat shoe, but yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I was proud that the pennies made it again. That if you want to ask about too high, I don't know how the penny two is higher than the penny one. I don't understand
Crazy,
that. Like
because the
that.
penny two is not even comfortable. Like the
No.
midsole is so flat and it's supposed to have Zoom technology in the front. It feels like it has cardboard in the front. So
Yeah, that was a weird one. I felt bad because again, you don't realize how many amazing shoes Nike.
there's
I
so
mean,
many.
they bring them out so often. I
Yeah.
mean, they just year after year after decade after decade, like they just, they're the bar for the sneaker industry and they continue.
Hmm.
And so you forget how many shoes, right? So I go through the list and I start thinking about shoes that are on there and I quickly could list another 50. And then it's like, well, how do you
Yeah.
fit in that? Like
Yeah.
where do you put them in? What do you
Yeah.
take off? And that's why, it makes it a little easier if you take off Jordans, but then you'd
Yeah.
still have Bates, right? You're still
Yeah.
but I wish that there was a little more love for the cross training. There's no nomos in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was a great shoe. Like for
yeah, no
those that remember like
stickers.
the time, it was like 96.
Yep.
Um, that was an incredible shoe. Like what's another with the Zoom
Uh,
96,
yeah,
which
that's
was
a Zoom.
the trainer version, the one that Barry Sanders wore.
Yeah, the Zoom turf. Yep, the
Yeah,
Zoom
that
turf.
was phenomenal.
That
And
was
that was
like,
like that's when trainers were the coolest thing ever. Like the 90s, training trumped basketball. Like
yep.
people were wearing Reebok or they were um wearing Adidas over wearing some of the Nike product that
Yeah.
was out there. So like to
Yeah, you had the
actually play.
Keyshawn. Yeah, the Keyshawns came out, the
Hmm.
equipment line that Adidas did that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I thought like the Diamond Turf, and I get it, like but the Diamond Turf was again, that was just one of those things. You had Dion, I mean, Bo Jackson ushered in that whole line. It
Yeah.
was it was a great era for me, that
Hmm.
late 80s to mid 90s trainer. Um, and in the tennis world too, like that was the whole Agassi line
Yeah.
was, for me,
Yeah.
well,
Like they could have had multiple Agassi shoes on there because they were incredible and people were wearing them on the
yeah.
street.
And they were, it was kind of, because Jordans were Jordans, but they were kind of they outpriced a lot of the marketplace,
Yeah.
right? So you had $100+ shoe and they sold out. So it wasn't like, again, they weren't accessible.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I thought from the basketball line, not seeing the Revolution or the 89, the Flight 89s in
Mhm.
there, or the Delta Low, like some of those are some of my favorite basketball shoes from the late 80s that weren't in there. But I thought like the I can't the David Robinson. Yeah, I know there's a couple iterations, so I get like the names messed
The
up.
non-pump one, the one that came out
Yeah,
before the pump,
yeah.
like the one
And
that
then
is like
White Man Can't
classic
Jump.
Spurs colors. It's
Yep.
white with black and then like the teal or not teal.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
like
the gray and teal,
yeah,
like it's
that
kind of
one.
looks like an Air Mag, or like that
Yes.
colorway.
Like it's
Like,
and it's that high. It's like super high. It's a little shorter than the Air Mag.
yep. Yeah, I thought that shoe, kind of, yeah. Again, it's just a lot. It's so
Yeah.
many. I thought there was a lot of Air Maxes that were omitted that
Hmm.
they put the staples in there, right? The 95, 97, the 90s, and of course the Air Max one. But
Yeah. But like
there's
the 96 easily could have been on version
yeah,
one or version two could have been
93s,
on there.
93s.
93s definitely could have been on there.
I I was kind of disappointed not to see, like the 2006 360s that kind of spawned that kind of brought
Hmm.
back into the Air Max.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of dead for
Hmm.
basically because the Air Max Plus made everybody forget about, the Air Max basically.
Totally.
And so, but then when those 360s came out, that gray and red, kind
Yeah.
of homage to the Air Max One colorway. I thought that was a great shoe. I thought that was a phenomenal shoe. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that all the Jordans belong on there. I mean, maybe the Jordan 8 doesn't make the list if you wanted to add another Nike shoe in
Yeah.
there. Um, you know, the Jordan, you have to have the championship years, so I get
Yeah.
it. the
I think
11.
that's why the 8 gets on there
Um,
because that was the end of the first three-peat. And, we think of just some of the performances that Jordan had in the 8 in particular. It was like he was like godlike. So,
Now
you
that
know,
you, oh yeah, to your point, yes, the championship years. But now going back to your dunk comment, because I'm looking at this, yeah, how is the Jordan 11 lower than the Nike Dunk? Like
there's
it's
there's no way. There's
you can't
no
even
way. And when you
you
just like
can't
because
put
then
that.
that's why the list becomes so confusing or so debatable because you've added Jordan. But there's
Yep.
no way from an iconic standpoint because the Jordan 11, launched in I think it was March of 97 and is never stopped. Like it's been arguably the most popular shoe. It's the shoe that they launch at holiday every single year. It sells out every single year. They retro the best colors. They made new colors. They make lows. They do it for holidays. Like, there's an Easter one that comes out every year. They've done women's ones now. They've done the IE, which is a cool shoe. Like it's a great summer shoe. And I think you and I both agree it's like one of the most underrated summer shoes that there is. I just don't know how the Nike Dunk is ahead of it.
No, and it shouldn't be. It should. I
Yep.
mean, you could argue the retro the 11s are more. I'm not gonna say iconic than the ones because you can't. Nothing beats the ones. I mean,
Right.
it's everything. But if you took it, I mean, I don't know. Before the ones like took on their own legs in the universe,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there had to have been more retro 11 pairs sold or 11 sold. So, um, I find it interesting. Like as I look through some of the list and I think through things, it's so easy now to call things retros. Like for instance, like the Air trainers, right? Like they weren't called the trainer 1, 2, they're just called Air trainers.
Trainer.
And to me, like that,
Yeah.
that's like the neatest thing. I think of some of those. I think of what shoes that they're bringing out today that would be kind of like that, right? I think like the Zoom Invincible. The Zoom 3 now is like a lot of people getting a lot of hype because
Yep.
now sneakerheads that are starting to wear them and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. Air Jordan. I was telling my son that today. We were talking about retros um and I was like, well, they were just called Jordans. There was no number, it just said Air Jordan
Yeah,
on the bottom.
it was the Jordan for that year. Like they didn't
Exactly.
even have a
Yeah.
number. Like I
They didn't
don't
have
know
a
when
number.
they
I don't
even decided.
know.
I
Yeah,
think
I
it
don't
was
know what
probably around the time that Jordan went to play baseball
I think it
that
was
they
the
actually gave he came
yeah.
back and obviously he wore the 10 and then he wore, a couple other shoes and then he came back for the first full year and it's like this is the Jordan 11. Like it was a thing.
Yep.
And then you started to kind of name the other ones going backwards, but it was like that's what I remember is that was the first Jordan that actually was labeled a shoe, like a number. And it's like, well, I guess the other ones every year was a different one.
Yeah. Well, and to think that Nike even had shoes again, and the Air Max weren't called the years either. They just have
No,
Air
Air
Max.
Max.
I still have all my old Air Max boxes still, and they just say Air Max. They don't
Yeah.
say, 95, 97. So I just think like Nike has to what they've done to the sneaker culture to have shoes that are just labeled, right? Like no
Yeah.
one was doing that. First of all, you didn't have shoes that sold continuously like that. Like
Yeah.
you could make a new iteration and then whether it's whatever it was, right? So to have a 1, 2, 3 Pegasus 39, like
Yeah.
39
That's
later.
that's like I think that's that one when you think that the
Um,
Pegasus is actually named and it's differentiated by the number of Pegasus that have come out. Like we're at 39, and even think about like the last couple of years, how long the Pegasus 38 has had legs to be on the market until the 39 came out. It's pretty amazing.
yeah, we owe a lot to Nike. It's
Yes.
definitely, I think, whatever some people, whether they are fans of Nikes, you still have some of those people like, oh, I don't like Nikes. I don't like whatever it is. I don't know what reasons why politics,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, you and I don't have jobs if it's not for Nike. We don't, we talk about how long we've been
Well,
with
I
Foot
have a job. I just wouldn't be
Locker.
working where I work right now at Foot Locker. Like, it's like I would
Yeah.
be doing something else. And
Yeah.
life would look totally different without Nike. I would like. There's no denying it.
Yep. It's the epitome of what everyone strives to be. I mean,
Yeah.
Adidas goes in waves. New Balance, I think what they hit 5 billion, and they're they're shouting that to the world that they hit $5 billion as a company, and they're excited for the future. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, Nike's Nike, and I owe a lot to them for my years as a sneakerhead, and that just inspiring too. Like whether
Yeah.
it's the commercials, like how many commercials do you remember?
Oh, I know. Like it's the
Nike.
story that Nike has told. And I think like, many people believe that they're not a sneaker company or an athletic company. They're storytellers,
Yep.
and they make you believe, or marketing agents, they make you believe that this is the product that you need to buy, and you buy it. That's what happens. They tell you it's the next greatest thing, and you're
Yep.
on it. Like I remember the Kukini or Kukini, depending on like when that shoe came out with no laces, and it was like just a slip-on summer shoe, and everyone had to have it. You could run in it because there was an Air Max cushion in it, and it was soft enough in the forefoot. It's like, yeah, you need to have it. I remember so many people in our store wore them like as the shoe that they wore at work because they thought Nike told them it was the greatest thing ever.
Well, every athlete, right? I mean, for every Curry
Yeah.
that has done well, it's I think Curry's like the only one. Like I can't think of every iconic athlete,
Yeah.
whether it's Tiger Woods, whether it's a Barry Sanders, obviously, your KD, your LeBron, I mean Nike, the Morant, the Ja one comes out this year, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Well, we'll see what
yeah.
that means after
Well,
all
we'll
the
see. Yeah,
stupidness that he's done this year.
yeah,
So
that's definitely tainted that for sure. But
yeah.
they somehow are able to, and I think a lot of that is that you have these young kids and athletes that come up and they don't really. I I can't imagine there's too many athletes if you ask them what shoe contract would you want. I just can't see them saying, "Oh man, I really want Under Armour," or "I
Yeah.
really Adidas signs me."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you'll go where the money is. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everybody would want Nike, even now, even today, right?
Yeah.
So
I think the exception is, yeah, you maybe, well, I'm trying to go in a different lane, or yeah, I need to have creative control. Like I think that was part of Kawhi's thing,
yeah,
that hey, I needed to have a bigger stake in what I was getting in return, and then obviously a stake in what the concept or what the shoes look like. So that's why he didn't end up with Nike. He was with Nike. He was with Jordan Brand, but he was one of the guys, and I think he wanted to be the guy. After 2019, and him in my hometown of Toronto won the title, and I think the world was Kawhi's oyster. Fast forward 3 years or 4 years later now, he's somewhat healthy, but he was incredibly efficient last night. I'm still, marred by how good Kawhi looked against the Knicks last night in LA. He absolutely torched them. So I think he was 38 and he missed six
well,
shots from the field. So
you wonder who's like a Kawhi. You think of those athletes and how much bigger they are as Nike athletes as opposed
mhm,
to not. And where's a Donovan Mitchell? If he's made a Nike shoe for the
totally.
last 4 years or so, what does that look like? What does a Curry look like if he actually would
If
have
he was a
stayed
Nike athlete.
all these years? And are there Curry shoes on this list that make
Yeah.
number 20 or something?
I think Corey's impact on basketball,
Yeah.
there's definitely a Curry shoe that's on this list if he was a Nike athlete.
Absolutely. So I just think they do an amazing job of that, and
Yeah.
like the point, they tell stories. They're the Olympics. They're always right there with the Olympics. Telling some story and inspiring and motivating, and we all do it. I still do it at my age, and obviously I'll never have a career in athletics and
No.
anything. And, but I still love putting on the shoes and, going out to the gym. Now it's Metcons instead of Jordans
Hmm.
and doing those. But there is still something that when you lace up your Jordans or your Nikes, it is different. And I can't explain, I can't put it in the words.
No.
I love, when I mean I love 990s, it's, that is my shoe, right? Like 990s I love them, just growing up in the
It's a
area,
DC thing.
what they mean in that area. But it's not the same as when I lace up a Jordan, or even when
Yeah.
I look for that matter, the
Yeah.
reimagined threes, like just like looking at that shoe and what that means in the history of sport and sneaker culture. Like it's
Yeah.
just, you really can't put it in the words, but um that it's special. It's
Yeah.
special.
No doubt about it. So, hey, as we're wrapping up here, and I think we had some great conversation, I definitely think the audience need to have us take a crack at a top 10 of this list. So, Andy, I'll
All
let
right.
you go first. Take
All right.
a crack at who you think should be top 10. You can go reverse order, you can go top to bottom, your total choice.
I I have to have the foam posit in there when you talk about technology and sneaker culture and everything it did. So I think 10 would be for me foam posit.
Okay.
Doesn't have to move up a ton, but I think that's in there. I would love to see the Blazer in the top 10, and maybe kick out that dunk if you're gonna put a shoe like that. Air Max Plus, that's another one. I think that what that did for the Air Max line, it kind of kept the Air Max line going um, when it was kind of dying out. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the Air Max Plus has a place in there. Um, I don't know which Agassi shoe, but I just feel like that place in that late 80s, 90s tennis, like that deserves a spot in sneaker culture.
Okay.
Um, that kind of and really when you think about that, like with the Agassi line, it was kind of like the Jordan 1. He broke through, right? Like you're supposed to wear an all-white shoe to Wimbledon. You're supposed to just,
Yeah.
God save the queen, and you go and you act perfect. And Agassi and Nike was like, man, F it. Like, no, we're
Yeah.
not, you're gonna wear bright colors and do all
Yeah.
that. So I think that deserves a place in there for sure for me. The Air Trainer 1, whether you want to give it to Bo Jackson, John McEnroe, whatever you want to do, to me, that's a top 10 shoe.
Okay.
First cross trainer ever. So how many is that? Four that I've given?
You're at five. You got five left.
All right. So if we got five left, the Jordan 4, Jordan 11,
Mm-hmm.
then man, I gotta bump. We're gonna have to bump something off of there because I think that you can't take off the top four on the list, right? So you can't take off the Jordan 3, you can't take off the Air Max 1, can't take off the Air Force, can't take off the Jordan 1. So
Yeah. So yeah,
um
you need an honorable mention there.
an honorable mention, yeah, I guess the honorable mention would have to be the Air Max Plus, just
Okay.
because it's already an Air Max 1 on there. So
Yeah.
keep the foam posit in that top 10 though.
I agree. So yeah, I think a very interesting list. Mine's a little bit different, but pretty close to what you have. So if I'm going to go reverse order to give us a little
All right, there you go.
drama here. So number 10, trainer one. That's what it has to be on the list. I think just the impact of cross training has got to be on the list. Number 9 is the foam posit. I totally agree from a cultural standpoint, and from Penny wearing it to how important it was, throughout the 2000s. It's got to be on the list. I think got number 8, Air Max 95. It's arguably my favorite shoe that is not a Jordan. So it's got to be on the list. That's number 7. Or number 8, number 7. I think just even from where I live in Toronto, the phenomenon that the Air Max 90 has been over the last 33 years, it's got to be on the list. So that's number 7. Number 6 is the Air Max 1. So I think that's the best Air Max of all of them, reiterations, the OG ones, the collaboration. So that's number 6. And then, so, I haven't mentioned any Jordans. Well, we're about to go in. So we got number 5 on my list. And obviously, there's a couple honorable mentions that I have, but the Jordan 4, and that's my favorite, is number 5. Number 4 is the Jordan 11. I think that's the bail. It could easily be 3. It could easily be 2, but I'm going to go with the Jordan 11 at 4. The Air Force One at 3. So this is now, the top tier of this list is not that far off what the complex list is. Number 2 is the Jordan 1. But I think the most iconic of all shoes, and I think like the one that kind of kind of broke the ceiling in so many different ways is the Jordan 3. I think Tinker doing the shoe, I think the elephant print, the elevation of premium leathers, how it looked, there was no swoosh on it. And it's funny, like the shoe that I'm choosing as number one had no swoosh on it. So that to me is the number one shoe of all Nike shoes, including Jordan. Yeah, I think if we were not including Jordan, yeah, I think you can kind of quickly go back through my list. It's the Air Force One, just like the meaning and how many reiterations, how like the white Air Force One, triple white for years now is the top selling shoe year in and year out. It's unbelievable from a Nike
It's not
catalog.
even close. It's not
No,
even close.
no,
There's
yeah.
no other shoe out there.
The only way that it can't be number one if there's no inventory available in it. So that is kind of the perspective that I have on many different fronts when it comes to the the Nike top 50. And I think, yeah, we've talked about a lot of changes that are out there, but I think that's a list that kind of represents a lot of different. I had a hard time the Penny not being there. I had a hard time the Cortez not being in the top 10. Those would be honorable mentions as I was kind of scribbling out a list. The Jordan 5 definitely bothers me not being in the top 10, but again, this is why we have a list of 50. But I think those shoes have to be considered to be in the top 50. And again, I don't have the Nike Dunk, although I love the Nike Dunk. My
Yeah.
favorite shoes, it might be there, but as
Yeah.
a top 10 when looking at it holistically, it's not.
I think I like that you put the Jordan 3 above. And for one, when the Jordan 1 came out, it wasn't like everyone was waiting in line to buy them. Like,
No.
it was kind of like they sat on shelves, they were marked down. Heck,
Yeah.
the Lost and Founds have a sale tag on it because they were all on sale because no one
Yeah.
was right. So, and then you had the 2 that was a flop, retail wise. And then you had the 3 in the slam dunk contest, and just that really took it to the next level, right? I
Totally.
mean,
And that's why it
yeah,
gets the stamp of approval of being the
yeah,
best Jordan and the best Nike shoe, period.
yeah, yep. Because it took off literally from the
Yeah.
free throw line. It
Yeah.
took off, and that
Like,
picture, right? Like that
yeah,
picture of Duncan from the free throw line is,
you got it.
yeah. So I like your top 10. It's
Thank you.
good.
Appreciate it. So, Andy, really good conversation. Appreciate the time. Hopefully, when we connect again, we're definitely going to have you back. And, hopefully, the reality is that Lamar Jackson is our quarterback
Hey,
because we have all the different pieces, both on offense and defense. We have a great draft. And we're talking the title comes back to DC for the fourth time. So appreciate your time, man. I know we've
hey,
played a lot of
appreciate it.
phone tag and a lot of text messages to try and get this happening. But again, I think we had a great conversation about something we're both very passionate about, and it's the brand of Nike and some of the shoes that they made over the last, multiple decades. So appreciate your time. So as we wrap up, where can those that want to follow you? I know you do some great stuff with your kids. You work in one of our stores down in Florida, which you've relocated to. So if
Yeah,
you've never
anyone.
been, to the champs in Florida, and we only have one champs really we talk about, it's called Home Field. So tell us about Home Field a little bit real quick, and then how people can find you on social media as we wrap up.
Yeah, come down to Miami. I'm in the Miami area, and we have our store in Pines that 35,000 square feet layered in with performance, and that's where I've had to take on kind of a new life of running and getting into running shoes and things. But yeah, AP and Instagram, I love anybody that's going to talk music and sneakers and sports. That's kind of what I'm at. So AP Stearns on Instagram is where I love connecting with people. So love the podcast, man. I've been a big
Appreciate it.
fan since you
We need to get
started.
you some merch.
Yeah, I know, man. I need to get, you brought
We're,
out
we're
some,
gonna work that long sleeve for you. Don't worry.
I'm gonna get some. I gotta connect with you on at least a t-shirt. It's a little bit too hot for hoodies down here. So
Yeah.
but no, I to how many episodes are you in now? That
We're approaching 130 now.
Yeah, so I mean that's awesome, man. I love seeing that, and your passion for music and
Yeah.
sneakers and sport and all that. Like it's really cool to see. So, glad to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem, no problem. So again, like that, this is the part of the reason you have to come back, because we could have a whole separate conversation and not talk about shoes. Like there's the whole genre of what we call hip hop that, you can see many of my old tapes from the 80s that I still have. And, Wu-Tang is hanging in my living room, but also so are butterflies and rainbows, because I have a daughter that's 7 and that's what she loves. So we definitely will have to have you back and have a full blown hip hop conversation. But again, Andy, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you very soon. So thank you everyone for listening. This is Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life, Lionel McDonald with Andy Stearns. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye for now. Peace.
Yeah.